Today's guest is a retired school teacher. She's here to offer some insight into public education and what it means to be one of the most important people you can. Also, she's someone really important to me, whom I've known for the majority of my life and oftentimes was like a mother to me. I present to you my dear friend, Sylvia Weathers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for tuning into another episode of the Dumpster Diaries Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Justin Allen, and I'm here with my buddy, Moses Wartooth. And today, we have a very special episode for you. We have a new guest, but first, we need to plug some of our affiliates and sponsors. One, you need to buy our card game. Check the link in the description below. It is worth every single penny. Moses and I say it on every episode. It is one of the funniest things you could ever play at your house, right?
And it's one of the cheapest games you can actually get that you're going to have hours of enjoyment from.
And not to mention, it is locally made here in Texas. Proudly manufactured in China, but that's a different story.
We still touch it, don't worry.
Yeah, and also, we did talk about this on the last episode. It is shipped from our storage facility. So we put our hands on it, we pack it, we get it to you. There is no third-party vendors, there's nothing like that. You get straight from us, straight from the guys really pushing it, man. So be sure to check out that card game. Another thing you need to check out is Small Price Productions. Also, the link is in the description. These guys are hosting comedy shows all throughout the East Texas region. They have big hitters from Houston to Shreveport to Dallas to Austin. Heck, I think even one of the last shows we went to, they had a regular from Joe Rogan's Comedy Club.
Yeah, they did.
Shout out to Roger McDaniel. Hilarious dude. And they bring big laughs for a small price. And I highly encourage you to buy tickets to that. And plus, you're supporting small business and you're bringing something that's good to the East Texas community.
And for everybody who complains about there's never nothing to do around here, here's something to do.
Yeah, yeah, because that's always a chief complaint, like in our area, is there's nothing to do. But there is something to do. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and get on to the show. We have today my good friend, Sylvia Weathers, and she is a retired school teacher, and she's going to come on and school us about what she's done in her life and how she had her career and how that went and some of the current events taking place that are affecting schools throughout Texas right now, man. But Sylvia, how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you. Glad to be here. This is very interesting.
Yeah, I know, like, before we got started, you were just like, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm kind of nervous. Well, not I don't want to do it, but, like, I'm kind of nervous.
Kind of nervous, yeah.
Everyone does, man. It's, we've had some guys that are pretty serious people that are like, yeah, like, I'll do it, like, you know, like, kind of more like, think like the alpha male type. And then when it comes time to scheduling, be like, okay, I'll be there on this day. They back out. You know, they're like, oh, I don't want to do it.
I don't do that.
All the courage goes out the window when the lights and cameras start coming on, and you know. But we appreciate you coming on. I mean, this is something that is like a big issue, a big topic, like right now, especially with all the recent legislation that's passed in Texas and how it actually affects students. And we'll get on that. But first, I just want to talk about you. I mean, I know the stories, but they don't know the stories. So let's talk about Sylvia. What's your origin story? How did you come to be a teacher? I mean, you have a pretty interesting past, you know, especially prior to the age of 13.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting considering that I ended up with a 32-year teaching career in English, with my native language being German. Yeah. So my family moved here when I was 8, and I originally wanted to be a journalist. That was my thing. And when I met my husband at SFA, and he's from Lufkin, and you know, Lufkin doesn't really have a high demand for journalists.
Not a whole lot happening in that town.
No, I applied at the Lufkin Daily News many years ago, and they told me, well, we can't pay you what you're worth. So we moved off for about a year to Longview, and while I was there, I worked a completely meaningless dead-end job that I hated.
Is it a job not to be mentioned right now? Or?
Well, I did data entry. It's nothing illegal, but it was definitely lame. And doing the same old thing every day, and they made me big promises, you know, because I was one of the only ones who had a college degree. And needless to say, 1 week and 1 week before I would have been there a year, I got canned on a Friday afternoon.
Oh, wow. Well, at least I waited to the end of the week.
That's true. That's true.
Makes payroll easy.
told me I was lackadaisical. At the time I wasn't teaching, so I had to look the word up. Kind of like, I really wasn't into it, and no, I was not.
Sure.
But I had actually been talking to my husband about going back to Lufkin and going back to school and taking up teaching. And I remember I called my dad up, and I was crying, and he kind of laughed. He thought it was kind of funny. I guess because I was so devastated over losing this, dead-end job.
A job that you didn't care about anyways.
Right.
Just like crying on the phone and just like have a mental breakdown. Is this what she really wants to do? Or is she just losing her marbles?
Well, no, that's debatable. But
you got some stories.
But long story short, I actually said, okay, I'm going to move back to Lufkin and start summer school. And my husband was going to stay up in Longview and come see me on the weekends. Well, within 2 weeks, we were both back in Lufkin.
Yeah.
You know how that goes.
Oh,
so.
Yeah, the inevitable void just calls you back. Right?
It does.
This place has its own gravitational pull.
It's got something. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, I've been here 40 years now, almost. But, so I went back to school and had always decided I would.
And where'd you go to school at?
SFA.
SFA, right?
I went to SFA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I sure did.
And you got a degree in journalism.
I had a degree in journalism, minored in German and English.
Mm-hmm.
And
I could see you picking the German.
Yeah,
we didn't go over it, but
You
Sylvia,
needed a Hail Mary.
Sylvia used to live in Germany until like the age of 13.
I was 8.
8?
I was actually 8, and it was intended that we move back at some point. Mm-hmm. So we spoke German at home, and I continued reading and writing German, and took German in high school, and took German in college, placed out of like 15 hours.
Yeah.
I never moved back, but my parents did. So I'm glad that I kept the language, even though, in this area, German is not exactly the the language to be fluent in.
Well, I don't know. According to Kanye West's new album, you might be onto something there.
Oh, really?
Oh, you really don't know?
I really don't know.
Okay. Yeah, we're not going to go into
Yeah.
that. That was a joke and point. Kanye West, basically, I'll go ahead and give you a backstory. He just released a new album that's basically banned on every single platform except for X, right?
Okay.
And it is the most, anti-Semitic, crazy, he has a song literally called Heil Hitler on
Oh,
there.
Jesus, no.
And it literally, in some of his songs, he's incorporated, speeches from Hitler and stuff. So that's what that joke was. Had you known that would have been a good landing joke. But, now.
Oh, my gosh.
You got to get on the internet more, Sylvia. Come on.
I'm just on the wrong sites, I guess.
Okay, so you get to college, you get a degree in journalism, and so now you're like, hey, I'm gonna teach. I'm gonna do this, right?
Well, when I went back to get the teaching, I had to get more hours in English.
Okay.
For teaching English, because high school, is subject specific. Mm-hmm. So I did that and got my first job teaching at Lufkin, ISD. And I didn't get the job right out of finishing school. I actually long-term subbed for a year, including at alternative school when I was pregnant, highly pregnant.
Oh, fun.
And I really have to say it was probably the best teaching experience as far as, because there was such an weird range of kids with different things that they did. Like I had a kid in there in alternative school, okay? He wouldn't cut his hair. Thug there, right?
Yeah.
Good old East Texas.
Real rebellious, man.
Yeah. Nicest kid ever.
Way to stick it to the system.
and
I'm a person, dude.
And the funny thing is he was like a quarter Cherokee, you know. And yeah. So he really had
kind of
a
part
reason.
of their heritage.
But then I also had kids who literally were thugs and had, the ankle bracelets on them. So.
Oh yeah, juvenile delinquents for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a good eye opener.
So what drew you to teaching? Was there any altruistic views you had, or was it? Do you feel like it was just a natural calling, or was it one of those things where?
I'll share a little secret with you.
Okay.
When I always liked to read and write ever since I was a kid, and I used to play school. With my friends and with my stuffed animals, and I loved being the teacher. I did, and it just, I don't know.
It's awesome.
And then when I, had the meltdown and told my dad about losing the job and told him I was going to go into teaching, he was like, well, first, are you sure that's what you want to do? It's a tough job, and yada, yada. And then, oh, by the way, your great aunt and another, several kinfolk were teachers. I never knew. So
Nice.
it was a calling, I think.
Yeah, that's good. I'm a firm believer in there's no coincidences. So
I don't think there are either.
I think everything kind of happens for a reason, and I think call it God, the universe, whatever you want, but I think everything kind of goes the direction it needs to go. So, and a lot of times we're not even aware of that pull and push.
I was not at the time, but the older I got, the longer I did it, the more I do believe.
So
did you always want to teach high school, or was there ever a desire to teach younger children, or was it just
heck no. Look, I love little kids in very small doses.
Yes.
I love my own. And even that was kind of funny because they're 10 years apart. So the good Lord knew what he was doing. But I picked high school because I wanted to be on more of an adult level.
I got you. You didn't want to babysit as much?
I didn't want to wipe snotty noses.
Yes.
I did a little bit of subbing, the lower grades before I started. And I remember I was subbing pre-K. And we had to walk the kids out to the car. And I'm walking this little girl out to her car. And I'm watching her, get in the car. And her mother never acknowledged her. Her mother never talked to her.
Wow.
Her mother never turned around, and I was just shocked.
Yeah.
Because when my kids, got in the car, it was like, "Hey, how was your day? How's it going?" It was shocking.
Jeez.
And then another time I was doing 4th grade, and we were sitting in a circle on the floor, and one kid's like, "Can I sit on your lap?" And I'm like, no, you cannot. So, high school, definitely. Yeah. Because with the high school, especially juniors and seniors, they're almost adults. You can get on that level. You don't really have to deal with the parents as much.
Sure.
And my students always knew if I called you parents, it was bad.
You really messed up.
It was really, you screwed up big time.
Yeah. And that was the thing, a little surprise here for our viewers that watch the show. Sylvia actually taught me English in high school. I actually taught Moses as well, too.
Yep.
And so, I just remember there was times, just being a kid and struggling, like whatever, normal kid stuff, I would put it in the realm. And you just needed like an adult that would just talk to you. And you were always that person, man. And you came to be one of my favorite people in the world. That's why we stayed in contact. And so I published an advertisement to try to get people on the show. And one of the things I asked for was a teacher. And Sylvia actually messaged me and then got on the show. So it was really good.
I was excited.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of times, man, I was struggling. I was doing dumb stuff and wasn't a huge reader in school and definitely wasn't a writer. And then funny how that did a complete 180 later in life. But yeah, no, it was great having you as a teacher. And I don't think I could do it. I've thought about it before, but no. I'd lose my marbles, especially now. I think now,
It's gotten a lot harder, and I finished, I did 28 and a half years in public ed.
Yeah.
And it got to be mentally very overstimulating, to the point I even had some health issues with my blood pressure, and that's ultimately why I decided in December of 2020 to call it quits with that.
Yeah.
I just felt like it, and I was getting older, of course, too, and that makes a huge difference. You just can't handle as much anymore, and then you realize that it's a lot more to it than what you can offer anymore at that point. So when I ended up going to private school and having, my biggest class, 7 kids, several classes, 1 or 2 kids.
Probably a lot easier.
Kids who were eager, kids who were well behaved.
Yeah.
I never went home stressed. That was a good way to end the career.
Yeah.
So that was a huge difference.
So you've had this basically 3-decade term as a teacher, right? This career. And, especially now in today's age where the sharing of media, like social media and all that stuff, ideas, information is rapidly changing and stuff. And you constantly see, one political party or another getting demonized. It's kind of like the mainstream media will hit like a specific topic and be like, attack this, whatever it may be. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, over the 3 decades, have you seen like the change in the agenda that has come down from like the political spectrum that affects the school system?
Yes. On one hand, I have seen that for 30 years they talked about the powers that be, that, school needed to be changed, reformed, and there were specifics. And the two things that came up all the time were smaller class sizes and increasing teacher pay, which still seems to be the main point. Now they're adding some legislation about dealing with kids who are high-risk behavior and, taking care of that, because teachers lost a lot of control in that respect. But the change, the biggest change, and I'm going to be very honest and open with this, I belonged to the AFT.
And what is the AFT?
The American Federation of Teachers,
which
is a union up north, and down here in the South we don't have union per se.
Yeah.
And was pretty active with it because you're supposed to belong to a teacher organization of some kind in case you ever have legal issues. And I specifically asked back then, are you all endorsing anyone in particular? And at the time they were not. Well, in 2008 they did endorse someone in particular, and I was
pretty good idea who that was.
I was not happy with the choice. And there was always talk about, the Democrats pour a whole lot more money into education, more than the Republicans do, and that is true. But now it's gotten to be, it's gotten to be ridiculous. It's just gotten to be ridiculous because it is not a, it's education is an issue that affects everyone regardless of political affiliation.
Yes.
So that in itself is.
And Moses and I, we've talked about on the show quite a bit, like our travels. So between the two of us, we've been to over 50 countries in our lives. Wow. And so we got crazy stories. And so we've seen all kinds of societies, from the best stuff you can imagine.
Third world to first world.
Yeah, like basically, you know. And one thing we noticed about our travels in Western Europe, for all the issues that they do have, one thing that we did notice was they had readily available access to high quality education at a very affordable rate, if not, in quotations, free. And that was awesome.
Not to mention almost all of them speak minimum of 2 languages.
And so there's something there. And, like, I know people don't want to spend money, really, like there's always talks about tax cuts and stuff like that. But that was always an area where I was like, no, you could really do some good with this, But the problem that I feel that is happening today is this is going to be a poor choice of words, but I almost feel that the school system is being, especially in Texas, is almost being weaponized as like a political tool right now.
Well, I mean, I agree with that. And, before that, I mean, they marginalized teachers who used to be respected as being, educated people. And all of a sudden, things became the teacher's fault.
Yeah.
Almost comparable to the police today.
Yes, exactly. You want the protection from the police, but you
if
don't
anything
want to
bad happens, it's their fault.
It's their fault.
Yes.
So,
all right, solution. Teachers wear body cams. Got it.
Honestly, I think that would be a good idea.
They do it in some, of your daycares and things where they have the cameras.
Okay, yeah.
Where
I
they see.
thought you were really about to say there's body cams on high school teachers now. I was like,
I wore one the whole time I was teaching. Just didn't know.
So over this 30 years, of teaching, I imagine is it fair to say you've seen it all?
I pretty much think I have. There's not a whole lot that surprises me anymore.
I don't know. I guess, kind of go back to what I was asking a little bit earlier, talking about, this change in agenda from like the political spectrum. Another thing you hear about is kids becoming unruly, and they're having these issues, and they're overdiagnosed and overmedicated, and they don't listen to authority, and it's horrible, and all the teachers are going crazy, and it's just a nightmare. Do you think children have really changed that much in 30 years?
No, I think the parents have changed. And in turn, what they are allowing their kids to do and how to behave, and the disrespect. I mean, that starts at home. That's not, you see it in kindergarten. You see it in pre-K with the kids sometimes. You know, I have friends who taught elementary school all their lives. And when you have students who used to be, like, say, self-contained, but are now in mainstream classroom, and they're cursing their teachers, you know, at age 5 or 6, they're kicking their teachers, they're screaming at their teachers.
Yeah.
And it's okay because, well, they, you know, have a certain IEP, they have certain issues, whether it's...
And what is an IEP?
It's an individual education plan.
Oh, okay.
So if
like
a child has...
like a special needs kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And it can range, you know, from learning difficulties to behavioral issues. And you have to abide by them, and this, you know, because the state has certain mandates, of course, that the teachers and the districts have to follow, and if you don't follow them, you know, which I know it protects the students and it protects the parents, but there are also parents out there who, you know, they abuse the system.
Sure.
So, and then, you know, they talk about, well, we're losing teachers, and, well, look at what you're doing to the teachers.
Yeah. And a big thing, like, I don't have any children, but a big thing that I, you know, was taught in college, studying biology and stuff like that, not all, but most behavior is learned behavior.
Yes.
So when I see these things or hear these things, it just makes me immediately wonder, like, what is going on at home? Like, where someone, like a child, feels that certain aggressive or violent behavior is acceptable.
Yes.
They're allowed to get away with it at home.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
if there's no discipline, what makes them think that you would be able to put them in any other situation and they would act any different than how they're going to act at home and what they're used to?
Yeah.
And having a child with even a behavioral or development issue in a classroom with other students, that's not necessarily a good thing, because I would think that would kind of branch out and show those other children that acting this way is okay.
It can be a problem, and the thing that is that the schools, and a lot of schools do this now, especially on the high school level, which is the one I'm, you know, most familiar with, is that they work on a point system, and regardless for whatever offense, you know, you commit, the points rake up, and eventually, you know, you'll detention, and then in-building suspension, and then maybe alternative school, and then just, you know, and it's just too, it's gotten out of hand.
Yeah.
It's just gotten out of hand. And it depends on the district, of course, too, you know, how they handle it and all that, and how the leadership is on a campus. That makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, that's why it gets into, like, voting for local elections. That's probably a pretty important thing, you know, because everyone focuses on the presidency, right?
Yes.
Outside of that, no one cares, you know? And then it's like, those are the people, your local guys are the ones you really want to care about. Those are the ones that really affect your day-to-day life, you know?
Yep.
And then anyone I talk to, because, I mean, we cover a lot of political stuff on the show, I'll talk people, they'll have opinions left, right, and center, you know? And then I'm just like, okay, like, who is your county commissioner? And they're like, well, I have no idea. Do you even know what a county commissioner does? Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, keep complaining about the roads then. You know, like,
they don't fix them.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, it's a good point.
Yes.
And then it's funny to see, you know, and I try to be nice, try not to jam people up, but it's funny to see how quickly they just pucker up, and they're like, oh, wait, and I'm like, yeah, so you're just out here parroting some stuff you saw on either Fox or CNN or maybe on a TikTok feed somewhere, you know, but you don't really have any idea what you're talking about because you don't really care.
I was going to be honest, I really don't know our commissioner's name right now.
Well, as you say, he's not exactly doing anything anyway, so is
it
worth even knowing?
No.
I mean, the same thing goes for, like, judges and stuff like that, too, you know? Yeah. And so then everyone complains, and yet nothing ever changes. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the ballot box and how many people are running completely unopposed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And all they need is one vote, which could be theirs.
Mm-hmm. And they've got it.
Win. and it's the same names every single election.
I know that does annoy me. I always want to just put I always feel like we should just run.
Well,
just so there would be a second name. I mean,
yeah.
If y'all ran, it would be very refreshing, because what I've seen from small town politics is that for a lot of these people who run for school board or other boards in a small town, it seems to some it is a prestige.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
title.
Dude, you're on a school board.
Public servant 101, dog.
It's not. And, I had heard at a specific school district, where they've had meetings and actually have had all out fights, physical cussing. And I'm like, if I ever ran for school board and somebody laid hands on me, no, that's not happening. No.
You ever seen what is that show? Vice Principals on HBO?
No, but I've seen Bad Teacher. No.
You should check out Vice Principals on
Okay.
HBO. It's a Danny McBride show. It's really funny. It's crazy, but it's just, it's Danny McBride. So it's, what, he was in a lot of movies.
Eastbound and Down.
Tropic Thunder. He was in This Is the End.
The Righteous Gemstones.
I'll show it to you.
I've seen Tropic Thunder, but anyway.
He's the guy who's like blowing everything up.
Oh, okay.
in Tropic Thunder, but he's a vice principal at like a public high school.
Okay.
And it's just a totally satire, it's just comedy, and but it's hilarious. It's
I'll
a
have
good
to check it out.
Yeah, you will like it. You probably relate to some stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But so I guess what do you think in your entire career? Because you hear about all this stuff with teachers need more pay, we need to focus on the kids, and there's always problems. It's one thing that I notice in society, right? I guess bad news gets the views, right? The controversial stuff. There's always got to be a problem. There's always got to be an issue, an enemy, a they, whatever it may be.
Yes.
What do you think is the most challenging issue that teachers face today, right now, in Texas? We can't talk about California.
No, let's not go there. Actually being able to teach them the way that teachers should be able to teach them, rather than focusing on a freaking test that the state of Texas pays hundreds of millions of dollars for.
You're talking about the standardized testing, right?
I'm talking about the STAR. Yeah.
Yeah. And now...
And there was TAX whenever we were kids.
Task, and then it was TAS. Toss. Yeah, it was toss before that. So
tosses right out the window.
Yeah.
Toss went out the
Should
window.
have happened.
Is that a joke in the teaching community?
No, but they called the tax.
Good one. The tosses right out the window.
That's a good one. Okay, I just got it. I'm a little slow today.
It's cool. Yeah, I took a nap before this started, so I'm still trying to get my brain back.
I should have. No, it was funny because it was toss, and then tax was son of toss. That's what they called it. And the irony of it is, it was just, there were some changes made. The bar was supposedly raised a little bit more, and then in effect, when STAR came along, they actually shortened the essay that y'all had 2 pages to write on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it became 1 page, which is very difficult for a writer, even a good writer, in the allotted time to write a 1-page decent essay. And
you can't say...
Yeah, to condense it down.
It's like fighting with one hand tied behind your back.
With your eyes closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good touch.
Thanks. And the irony of it is, they used to hire people and train people to grade those essays, and now they're talking about, since this coming school year, they'll be doing all the testing online, even though they said they're doing away with the STAR now, supposedly.
It'll just be turned into a new acronym.
A new acronym repackaged, right, and instead of one time a year, they'll do it throughout the year, supposedly. Is what
So
they're saying.
when you say that, what I hear is AKA some politician gets his name on a bill that gets passed through Texas State Congress.
Yeah. We ran into that all the time in military. It changes it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just change to change.
Change it, change the package.
Just
but
to say
it's still
that
the
you
same,
did something.
Same
Yes.
shit inside.
Yep.
It changes absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But now they're saying that with all this AI coming to be, that the AI will be grading.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is something I did. I was about to go into this in a little bit. But
okay.
yeah, you just keep. This is your interview, Sylvia. Keep going. Take
Well,
the floor.
it blows my mind because after grading hundreds and hundreds of essays, thousands of essays probably over the years, you get to know a kid's writing style, and it becomes if you pay attention as a teacher.
If they're writing it.
If they're writing it. And I still have a kiddo from Lufkin that I will never forget. And, I had a very specific rules on what to write and how to write it and yada, yada, and all the guidelines. And this kid turns in this 10-page, single-space, typewritten paper. Has no bibliography with it, and it's total crap. I don't think it even covered the topic it was supposed to cover.
Is that one of my papers?
No. This was when they were still actually, we just started with the computers at this point.
Okay.
So, and this kid was kind of a hoot anyway. So it was when we had English, a semester. Mm-hmm. And so it was December when the paper was due, right before Christmas break. And I called him out and I said, "This is not your paper." Well, I typed it up. And I was like, okay. So I called his mother.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, your kid." I still know the kid's name, but I can't. So,
names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, he wasn't that innocent. He was not innocent. But
we don't want like a lynching mob out here, like about this paper this kid wrote 30 years ago.
He may know it, but if he watches it,
he watches this,
he'll probably go, "Oh crap, that was me."
Yeah.
But no, I called the mom up and I said, "Hey, so your kid turned in this paper and it's not what I had asked for at all. In fact, it's it's not double spaced like it's supposed to. There's not a bibliography." And oh my God, she's like, "I saw him sitting at that computer." And I said, "Well, ma'am, I can sit at the computer for a long time and not get anything done." Yeah. And, so finally, and she kept on and on making excuses. And finally, the ruder she got, the nicer I got. And I finally said, "Well, ma'am," I said, "how about you come up here and see me and we'll read this paper together?" She hung up on me. And the policy, though, for the department was if you fail the research paper and you plagiarize, you fail the class. So he failed the class for the semester, And
same way in college.
And that's just it. Yeah. We were trying to teach them,
right.
This is our policy because in college they're not going to take that crap. They're going to kick you out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to the AI stuff, do you think it is a net pro or a net benefit, or is it coming at a cost here? Is it worth integrating into the school system and maybe even have students use it to learn? Because you hear about all these magnificent things that AI can accomplish and be used for and utilized with. But then it seems like, to me, you're taking out a huge human element. And I don't know, and there's like one issue like that I noticed in college is they were trying to crack down on students using AI to write their papers, specifically ChatGPT when it was first coming out, right? And I knew students who did, and they got away with it early on. And I warned them. I said, those papers you write are digital. They store it in their database. They will go back and look at those, especially if you try to publish anything. And I knew a few people that got caught, and I was like, well, rightfully so. And they're like, how could this happen? I knew a guy literally got kicked out of college because of it, which was sad to say because he was literally in his senior seminar for, I believe it was botany. And this is the last class he needs. ChatGPT is like a 30-page research paper, BS's it, goes in, sends it, right? And they caught it, boom. Because one of the professors, if I remember right, a piece of that information that was in there, he either was a part of that research or knew someone that was in that research. Because when you get into specialty crafts like botany or something like that, the community gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
And, so he got busted on it. But on the flip side, I actually personally know 2 students who wrote papers that were screened using that software. Like, I remember back in the day, they were using Turnitin, but I don't know if they're using it for the AI stuff now. And they got flagged for like 60, 70, 80, 90 percentile AI generated. Wow. But these students legitimately wrote these papers.
Yep.
And then they basically had to have a whole meeting, like pretty much a court case, and defend yourself. Mm-hmm. And a lot of, I don't know if it's a good thing to be integrated in education or not. Because if this is the way civilization is going, do you want to have an entire generation of people that are left behind unable to use it and work with it? And then what's going to be the cost if we do that? Like, are we just going to have a bunch of people that just can't ever write a paper?
Honestly, if you think about it, it's kind of like with the invention of the internet itself. You're going to have people who use it for good. You're going to have people who use it for bad. Mm-hmm. I don't think we need to rely on the AI too much because, like you said, it takes away the human element. It also takes away from that human creativity.
Bingo.
We had a student recently who was taking a college course, and this student was still in high school at the time and decided to use AI to write a fairly short paper. Yep. And the professor, caught it. And this person who did this is not a bad person, by any means. Just very much perfectionist and, fairly new to college and all this. And I guess was trying to go above and beyond rather than using...
Could have been as simple as, a lot of excuses I've seen or reasons I've seen for people plagiarizing stuff, whether it be AI or just in general, is time constraints.
They are, but you know what? I mean, for one thing, in high school, the kids never really understand what revising and editing is.
Yeah.
Okay? They don't. And I guess that's normal. You don't realize that until you get into college that, and especially for kids who struggle a little bit with writing, that I'm going to have to put effort and time into this. I mean, I was lucky. I was one of these. I can do the research paper the night before, okay, without plagiarizing. I can throw it together. But,
sure.
Now over the years, too, I
pour a glass of Merlot, put on some Fleetwood Mac, we're pounding this out.
Yeah, I take my time. I write and I rewrite, and the kids were always under the impression, well, my revision, my editing is I'm going to write a clean copy of it. I'm not changing anything. So
with no marks on it.
Nothing. Nothing.
You're a literal scribe.
And, yes.
That's all you are.
I'm perfect. And even I'll write something down. I still like writing it out in hand and handwrite it, and then I'll leave it alone for a while, and then I'll go back, a few hours later, and I'll read it over, and this doesn't sound good. This word isn't good. Whatever. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, and that's how my voice. We teach voice. That's how the voice, my style comes in, my wording, my choice of words and all that. And I think that's where the AI should, it's kind of a catch-22, like you said. If somebody wrote a perfect paper and they're going to be accused of having used AI.
Sure. You're going to have kids having to do that, like, Bitcoin blockchain for their, like, like a 2-page essay or whatever, But I think in my personal opinion, but, like, I don't have children, so, it's easy for me to say. In my personal opinion, I think when you walk into a school, it should be like 1970. Like, everyone gets a little locker, cell phones, tablets, everything goes in there. There's no technology through this door. Everything's handwritten. There's in-person exams, like nothing's take home. Mm-hmm. And then maybe have a class or two dedicated to be like, okay, now we're into the tech field. So teach them how to utilize these things, but keep schools and teaching how it should be versus like relying on machine learning to do that.
Yeah, I just graduated with a degree in graphic design, and we weren't allowed to use AI for that. Now, there was one specific class toward the end of the semester. The professor was like, okay, we've done this to this point. Now you can integrate AI into your work. but not too, like, it was still had guidelines on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay, because eventually AI is taking over. We can't stop it. But if you don't have the capability to do stuff on your own and just fully rely on AI, that's where I think the real issue lies. If you're a 7th grade kid and you've never written anything and you just use ChatGPT, you're not getting anything out of that.
Nothing. You're right. You're right. And the thing with writing is also just like, not everybody's a good writer. And I could tell, like when I was teaching kids to write an essay for STAR. Okay, there's basically a format, and they used to call it a formula. I don't want to call it a formula. It's a format. And you can do that, but I always tell the kids, if you're not a strong writer to begin with, I can't turn you into a Stephen King.
Yeah.
Just like if you're using AI for graphics or whatever, you still have to have a certain amount of talent, natural talent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could never... Artistic, I can't draw stick figures, so it would never help me because I would be shown to be a scam.
Well, I'll tell you this: I didn't really get into writing until my late 20s, and once I did that, it was a game changer. I mean, from keeping a journal just to talk about how you feel about things, just to process what happened for the day or whatever it may be. I've written a lot for the show, stand-up comedy and stuff, and so you see the revising, the editing, and it's a talent, it's a skill that I feel often in this day and age goes underappreciated, but it is the backbone of like all entertainment and media that everyone consumes for the most part. Everyone loves Netflix, but there's teams of writers that work on that.
Yes.
And you think they didn't do any revising and editing? You think they used AI for that? Now, creating some of the stuff, like as far as imagery goes, that's different. That's a whole nother story. But, and one thing I started doing, incorporating in it, is I started going really old school with it. I started writing people letters, like handwritten letters. And it was so cool. Once I started doing that, sometimes it's just letters of appreciation, sometimes letters of like affection or whatever it may be, right? Once I started doing that, my relationship with people changed, because it was no longer of like, oh, you just get a text or whatever, that I'm going to delete this Facebook at some point, I'll never see it again, who knows, or maybe I'll lose my phone and the texts are gone, but then they have like a physical thing they can hold. And I really think when it comes to like creativity in general and arts of all form, I think we're going to see it go full circle. I think it's going to become, no matter how crazy AI gets, I think it's going to become a thing where it's like almost like a really cherished thing.
That would be nice.
Now I think it's
don't be two schools of thoughts, because it'd be like radio to video. That same thing. Like, people still appreciate radio. They'll just be two separate. Like, you can like one thing and you can still go back and like another thing also.
That is true. But hey, man, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh to the day he died. So
He was good.
Yeah, I used to listen to him on the way to work when I was living in Alaska.
Good.
All those years ago. And one of my buddies, he was like, "You ever heard of Rush Limbaugh?" And I was like, "What?" And he put it on at the AM radio, and I was like, "All right, there's that." So he made some points. But so I just want to ask you before we get on to some of the political stuff. When you look back over your career as a teacher, what do you feel? A sense of satisfaction, appreciation?
I feel
dread,
satisfied in the fact that I know I touched a lot of lives. And it may not have been with the topic, with English itself.
Sure.
Because one of the reasons that I really went into teaching high school is because I hated high school with a passion. I did. I couldn't wait to get the hell out of high school. And I knew, because I had problems, there were things at home, and then I, had some friends who were going through some really crappy things when they were in high school, and I was kind of like the go-to person ever since I can remember. And so I thought, if I can go in there and I can help those kids find themselves, get a sense of themselves, who they are, and that they don't have to be perfect. And these 4 years in their life, these short 4 years, do not define who they are.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's the main thing.
That's good.
So,
that's good to hear.
The dread or the complaint that I have It's just the system itself,
Yeah.
you know, in those 32 years promising that they would change and reform, and all they did was throw money at it.
So overall, from the time that you started to the time that you retired, how do you feel like the education system, did it progress? Did it regress? Is it a better place now as you left it than it was when you started it?
I mean, they did make some improvements as far as monetarily. You know, they finally started boosting the teachers' pay a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Some schools were able to keep smaller classrooms because they didn't, you know, have tons of students. But in general, they've never, you know, even though they always said that they valued the teachers' input in making these changes, that's hogwash.
Yeah.
That is absolute hogwash. I mean, I remember
Good choice
being.
of words.
Thank you. I remember being on a few committees over the years, like a campus improvement and district improvement committee, you know, where we're like, oh, you know, we'd meet once a month and we'd do these cool little activities, you know, and how we're going to make the campus better. And I know I'm very cynical, but I can't help it. And I swear that stuff was put in the filing cabinets. And nobody ever looked at that shit again. And because
What's this?
well, the districts, you know, started for a while there. The big thing, the end thing was, well, we're going to do a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you mention a 5-year plan. That's the same thing they did in the military.
Everything. It was a thing.
5-year plan. 5-year plan.
Because 5 years is long enough, you can just keep pushing that off. And then when the time comes, there's normally a change of power in between then, so you just keep blaming it on someone else.
Yeah.
Yes. and the thing was, you know, they did that basically with the teachers. You know, we have, you know, vested interest in our district and in our school, and tell us what you think we should do, and we would do all this stuff, you know, and we would present it all pretty on the card, you know, on the poster board, and oh, wow, this is so cool. And it was like, so whatever happened,
Yeah.
you know, to what we were going to do? And
Behind closed doors, they were like, look at them. They think they're making a difference.
Yeah.
right. And I mean, I get it. The districts had to do it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. But the district administrators, they too knew this was a dog and pony show.
Yeah. So then it makes you wonder, like, what are we all doing this for? Like, why are we putting on this?
Was it to make the teachers feel better about themselves as
Yeah.
far as like feeling like they are at least trying to push and make a difference in something that would matter
To some point,
versus
and then
just stifling them?
the new ones who would come in, you know, they'd be all, oh, this is great. No, it's not. But like I said, you know, they had to have the documentation to give to TEA instead of Texas, and to give to the feds or whomever is going to come in and audit and make sure that we did everything that we were supposed to do. But ironically, and this is what I never got, you know, they say, you know, that they have on the TEA board, you know, former educators and stuff, and then sometimes I'll wonder, why are you agreeing to this stuff? You were a teacher yourself. You saw this.
Yeah.
You know, or send me to, you know, further educate myself at Region 7 in Kilgore. And these were just teachers who got burnt out on teaching. So they thought, well, I'm going to go teach them to teach.
Yeah.
And it just didn't make sense.
It's a total paradox.
Extremely.
Nobody's learning anything. You know?
Or if you're, you know, I mean, I know one time we literally went to a training for STAR, and this is when they had changed it to, you know, from 2 pages of writing the essay to 1 page.
Yeah.
And we went to a different region in Huntsville instead of ours because we thought we could get some new information.
Yeah.
And the lady there, she's like, I really can't teach you anything new. I can tell you, though, the reason they switched to 1 page for the essay is to save money.
To save money.
To save money on a piece of paper, kind of like, you know, the airlines cutting out the peanuts.
Yeah.
Or the olive.
Yeah, it's not
removing one olive
and
out
then it
of
was
the
like,
meal.
Oh, yes.
It was like a few $1 million a year.
It was
I think
insane.
Yes.
Jeez. You know? Gosh. Good gosh. Man, I don't know, man. It's a heck of a world, you know, teaching, and I think a lot of people that become well, one, I think teachers truly are the most important people in the world, and you always hear that parroted by every like nameless, faceless politician out there, right? But
who doesn't support them?
Yeah, and
exactly.
But I think it's a tough world, and I would like to see it where we can get to the roots of it and like actually let them teach and then make sure they're well funded in the right ways.
That the funding goes to the right places.
That's
and not,
the key thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then stop trying to put kids like in a box with like standardized testing and stuff like that. What's that whole? I think who said it? If you measure a fish's intelligence by its ability to climb a tree, it'll forever think it's stupid. And I think in some cases is what we're doing.
We are. When I first started teaching, we actually had the schools had ability grouping. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then some genius, I don't know who he was, I should have looked it up, or she, came along and said, we need to mainstream the kids, so all the kids need to be in the same, class.
Yeah.
But the irony was we kept the AP classes. We kept the honors classes. So why should I not have a special class for the struggling kiddos?
Ooh, yeah,
okay?
That's dirty. That's dirty.
It's real dirty. It's a hypocrisy is what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm going to keep those AP classes because, those...
And why do the schools do that? Is it just because it makes them seem better on paper, so more parents try to bring their kids to the school, or do they get more funding from the state, based on higher test scores, or... Do they just want some kid to go on to become a medical doctor and be like, you graduated from high school such and such. Congratulations.
The STAR test, literally, the schools are rated on the achievement of the STAR test. And
that translates to money.
Yes. Can we take a short break?
Yeah. Okay. We'll take a break here. All right, sorry about that, guys. Yeah, unfortunately, people have to use the restroom sometimes.
Yes,
right?
yes, we do.
But, all right, pick back up where we left off. So STAR testing, the way it sounded to me, or like just standardized testing, sorry, is that it was basically just translated to like a money game.
The intent of it was not only to, gauge where kids stand and what they have learned, but it was also to give teacher accountability, that the teachers were actually teaching the content that they were supposed to.
Yeah.
And it just was really sad because teachers were forced to teaching towards the test. Not as much in English, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, in math perhaps. But history, was completely, the history part of it, it's all memorization. It's all facts. Yeah. It's all stuff you have to memorize.
And don't get me wrong, I love history, but the thing is you're not creating anything and you're not solving a problem.
Exactly.
Now, we can argue that it's a different type of intelligence, right? Like
yes,
memorizing and then understanding these things and stuff, and especially if you want to try to like relay that to like current societal issues and stuff like that,
Yeah, there's a lot of people that need to go back and learn some history.
Have you seen the books we have on the shelf?
The right history.
Yeah.
Yeah, like George Washington, 77-6, Art of the Deal, tons of stuff. And, we really take I've done episodes where I've talked about the Roman Empire before, and there's a lot of added value to it, but I could see them really trying to focus on, like, mathematics and stuff and maybe the sciences because, and this is also something, too, I kind of wanted to get into a little bit. You hear the biggest complaint that once standardized testing came out, really the creation of the Department of Education and the standardized testing and all that, America went from being like number one in every category to bottom of the barrel in the Western world, pretty much. Do you think that is the cause of it?
I think it is a big part of it because there are certain entities who are making huge profits off companies like Pearson Education, which has been around for a long, long time.
Yep, I paid them quite a bit of money.
Okay.
Yep.
I think Cambium,
okay,
which is one that's also it's in Washington D.C.
What is it, McGraw-Hill as well?
They were more textbook companies.
Wait, they're in Washington D.C.
I think it's Cambium.
Oh, that's convenient. It's a hop, skip,
right next to their friends.
But
Elon Musk comes in with a chainsaw.
Somebody needs to.
Yeah.
But like when they were talking about, when Star was still owned by Pearson, they had a huge state-of-the-art, beautiful building up in New Jersey where the headquarters was.
Yeah.
Even though it's an international, it's everywhere. But when you're looking at, the state of Texas alone spending hundreds of millions of dollars for the distribution of the test, for the grading of the test, and in all those years of giving the test, like you said, education bottomed out. It didn't get better. They've seen absolutely no change. And, we're talking earlier during the break about, doing something repeatedly and getting nothing different, no different results out of it. Yeah. What's the point?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the point?
It's the definition of insanity.
Yes, yes. And so what it boils down to is some of these politicians who are getting paid off either by the lobbyists or they're, maybe they're investing in these companies,
these private companies.
Hint, yes, that's happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Then you're already on the wrong page. You're not being honest. You're not being transparent.
Speaking of lobbyists, I read something the other day that in Congress, there's 535 members, right, between the House and the Senate. There's 1,800 registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
That's just official on the books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I wrote something down earlier when I was doing my homework.
You're the only person that's ever come on here remotely prepared.
I'm a nerd. I'm a teacher. Let's see, there's this guy named Andrew McVeigh. He's the president of Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, okay?
Okay.
He's saying that districts need to be more responsible with their money, that schools being underfunded is supposedly a myth, and yada, yada. And he's actually against publicly funded lobbying. And he said that in 2017, $40 million was going to lobbyists for education, and it has come up to $100 million.
Wow, in that short amount of time.
Since 2017.
Dude, we got to get into education.
That's where the money's
at. Not as a teacher, okay? And then you have like we talked before about the funding. At one of the districts I was at one time, not a rich district by any means, but they created a position for an assistant superintendent.
Yeah.
And the district wasn't even big enough to have an assistant superintendent.
I've seen that during my time in the federal government. Like, positions will just get created just because they can. They're not even necessary.
Exactly.
And if you think that that's not happening, like, in all forms of government, then you are highly mistaken, ladies and gentlemen, because that is everywhere.
Well, you think about the AFT that I had mentioned before, that American Federation of Teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're all for, teacher pay raises and conditions and yada, yada, yet their CEO makes over $400,000 a year.
Let's figure that one out.
Okay. My eye's starting to twitch.
Yeah. Well, since we're getting on the topic of politics, I mean, one of the big reasons I wanted to have you in here, Sylvia, was I wanted to talk about the current events that's been happening in Texas, especially with this school choice, the vouchers. You're hearing this. They always latch on to certain little buzzwords in the mainstream media, and they just keep attacking it. But I just figured, hear it from someone who probably knows it best, has actually experienced it and knows what's going on to some degree, is in the trenches, actually. I know you're retired now, but, it's... I'm not going to go to an electrician for medical advice. Is all I'm saying.
No.
So what is it? How do you feel about it? I mean, what do you think?
They are trying to sell, they've succeeded because the voucher program passed, and they just like we talked earlier about. A lot of the things that have been done in education that have just been repackaged and renamed. Yep. They were trying to sell this as a pretty package.
And now, what is the voucher program itself exactly?
It's basically that what they said with this is that people who are wanting to take their kid like out of public school and put their kid into private school, that they can actually take government funding in voucher form. They'll never see the cash, but and they can transfer their kid from a public school into a private school.
Public to private.
Private.
And what is their selling point on the beneficial end of this? If the parent is not happy with their public school?
That's a huge part of it. That, they can be, because of the smaller class sizes,
Sure.
because they do, and having spent 3 years in the private sector, it's a dream come true as a teacher.
Yeah. The student-teacher ratio is great.
That and the fact that, the kids want to learn and the kids are well-behaved.
And I would assume the parents are more intervening because they're paying for the kids. So they're like, if I'm spending money, you're going to sit and learn.
Yeah, well, and they've been usually those are parents who've been invested in education from the get-go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see that in the school system too. You see when you have parent night or whatever, you see which. Have you ever seen the movie Freedom Riders?
A long time ago. Jennifer Gardner?
Yes, Jennifer Gardner.
A long time ago when it first came out.
And she was teaching, the lower level kids that have been in trouble, yada, yada. So they had parent night, long story short. Nobody shut up for her kids. And the guy across the hall was teaching the AP kids, and all the parents came.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lesson in itself.
It is.
And that's an actual reality.
It is. Very much so.
Yeah.
The ones you want to see, the ones you want to talk to, they're the ones who don't show up. So they were just trying to make this sound like, okay, now, guess what? You can send your kid wherever you want to send your kid. If you want to send your kid to private school, you can, because we're going to give you up to $10,000.
Is that per semester or?
That's per school year.
Per school year.
Per school year.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to play devil's advocate with this idea. Mm-hmm. I can tell you right now what's probably going to happen is every single private school is going to raise their cost by $10,000.
One of them already did. One of them already did. And
It's what happens when you put public money in private hands like that.
And again, if the money is free, the people who would normally not even have cared in the first place, they're going to be putting their kids in and still have the bad parenting skills. So then you're going to have kids that don't really care about being there interfering with the kids that do want to. So then you're in a repeated situation of bad education.
And that has actually, I've seen that. I've seen that where a kid was put into the private school because the child was having issues in the public school, and it did bring discord to the classroom. Mm-hmm. It did.
When in reality, the problem should have been handled at home, I would imagine.
Yes.
And then if the child was disciplined at home, you go to school and you're a decent human.
And sadly, I think this child, who was a pretty nice kid, okay, but I don't think he heard the word no at home.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is. It's huge.
So maybe a little corporal punishment.
Something. Something.
Not opposed.
The thing is, though, that even with the vouchers, the families still have to fill out an application, and there's a list of criteria. I have it here, but I don't want to get completely into it.
Up to you.
I would kind of like to hear some of the list.
Okay, let me pull this up real quick. I had it. So, the students, the applicants will be prioritized.
Okay.
Okay. So,
and right now, when it says we're going to prioritize, there's a catch.
Yes.
Anytime in human history people get prioritized, it never ended well for certain groups of people, is all I'm saying.
Oh.
Insert whatever group you want.
Yes, I'm thinking one. I'm not going to say it. We kind of touched on it earlier. Little guy with a mustache. So, on a serious note, though, students with disabilities from families with an annual income at or below 500% of the federal poverty level, which includes any four-person household earning less than roughly $160,000. Okay? Priority. Families at or below 200% of poverty level, which includes any four-person household earning less than roughly $64,300. Families between 200% and 500% of the poverty level, Families at or above 500% of the poverty level, limited to 20% of the program's budget. And then it says the voucher program also prioritizes students exiting public school over kids already in private school.
So is it saying that it's pandering to the most poverty-stricken people?
Supposedly.
Okay.
But that's, if you think about it, that's not a reality, because I was looking up yesterday, well, what if I have 4 kids and I want to put all 4 kids? Will I actually get $40,000? Mm-hmm. Okay, through the voucher program.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like at face value.
Yes, well, up to is the key word, or the 2 keywords. Up to. So there's no telling, this.
They give you $1,000 each kid.
That might be it.
And then you're just on
so
the
then
hook
you're
to pay.
responsible for paying the rest of tuition
Right.
and whatever costs that entail outside of that.
And that's, I know when I was at the private school, they do have, scholarships and things that they give to the kiddos, which is great, But again, this is something that looks super duper good on paper. But when you get to the reality and you start looking into, okay, if I have to pay $10,000 per kid for tuition, that 40 is already gone. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I may not get the whole 40 because of my income. What is my income? How do I qualify? How much do I qualify for? Because they haven't worked all that out yet specifically. I mean, they know they have a certain dollar amount. Yet they also have articles that have come out and said it could be into the billions by the time it gets rolling next year for the 26-27 school year.
So this is screaming 2008 market crisis. Back whenever they gave people loans that couldn't actually pay off the homes, and then they got in the situation where they ended up losing their houses. So if you were to get your child in a private school and then all of a sudden you can't afford it, they're either going to have to go back or get kicked out, or then something else has to
end up back into the public school that they came from, and then the private organization, the private school,
they
gets the money. Yeah.
Okay, but before we
someone needs to look into those organizations and who they lobbied with in Congress, and who they got to pass that bill through, man.
The thing is, before we even get to that point, the question is, I can apply to this school. That school still has every right to say, I'm sorry, we can't accept you. Okay, and that's the difference between public and private school. Public school cannot turn you away. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Private school can. They can say, well, I'm sorry, we can't do that. The private schools, so St. Cyprian's, for instance, when they were first created, they were created as a dyslexia school. They have a specific dyslexia program, and it's wonderful.
Okay. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I didn't either when I first got there. But it's awesome, okay? But not every private school has that. So if you have kids that you're wanting to send in there with, behavioral issues, that private school can say, I'm sorry, we cannot deal with your child. Mm-hmm. We don't have the facility to deal with your child. Whereas a public school has to. So that's an issue right there. And
gosh, it's like there's so many problems.
There are.
And it's like, how do you find the right solution? And I'm sure there's a lot. I know a lot of people that are very altruistic and like they're genuinely looking for the right answer, like how to make education better. But somewhere in the weeds and seeds, that it's clear as day. You can tell there's profiteering going on. If you take half a second just to look into it,
there definitely is, and
we saw the same thing in defense contracting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The
$75 for a bottle of bleach. Mm-hmm. Anything.
I remember watching documentaries over government things and expenditures, and I'm like, why?
It is insane. I'm not even lying. I have watched us pay for some of the weapon systems we worked on. For machine bolts, you can get at Lowe's for 17 cents. I've watched them pay over $200 for. Yeah. Because the verbiage says it has to come from that contractor, and they can charge whatever they want, dude.
That's what's wrong with a lot of things right there.
Yeah,
that is what's wrong.
True. And then at some point, like, you're just like, what is going on with this? So, and then this is the first I've really ever dived into public education, especially for children, because really I don't have children, and quite frankly I've been out of high school for quite a while. So I don't know if you can tell, but and there's clearly some questionable things going on. Is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, they're not just questionable; they're outrightly outrageous.
Yeah,
because I mean, I think what always got me is that they really undermined teachers. You're talking to people who have a 4-year degree, yet, like we talked about, having these campus plans and district plans, and, yes, we want to hear your viewpoint, but you really don't. And one of the biggest things is that, they have legislative session while school is still going on. So obviously they don't want the teachers there. I mean,
What, you couldn't make that meeting?
Oh, so sorry.
Where were you at?
We had to have it in April, or
pretty good time.
beginning of May or whatever. And, I mean, honestly, and then you have, and this is totally, I thought about this a while back, 75% of teachers are female.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So, yeah, there's a little sexism going on there.
So I will tell you this, because this actually comes to like a personal thing for me. So after I got out of the military, I was looking at jobs, and I was considering for a while to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think I actually messaged you about it at one point.
I remember. I do.
And then you see kind of this change in society where, and I don't really want to get too far in the weeds and seeds with this, but where the demonization of any kind of man or masculine man or any masculinity in general. Remember that huge phase that was going around for a while, and I just didn't feel comfortable applying to be a high school teacher. And I was just talking about teaching a government class or possibly a history class.
I guess it's better than a middle school PE, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I had to throw that in there. Sorry.
But I just didn't feel. I was like, no, I'm not going to subject myself to being around that, because you don't know, because this trend that is going on of just like attacking men basically for just the craziest stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like you need like an even ratio, I think, in my opinion.
Well, because a lot of those kids don't have a positive male role model at all. So it'd be nice if you could look to a teacher to fill that role.
Exactly.
So, and it's unfortunate that it's kind of like that. But dang, 75% of teachers are female?
Yes.
And that's nationwide, or is that in Texas?
Nationwide. It's a nationwide.
So, there's
statistic.
pockets where it's extremely higher. That's just the average.
Yeah. Yep.
Gosh.
So, you look at a lot of, it's amazing, because when I first started teaching, I was making $18,008 a year. Okay.
All right, baller.
It was
Calm down.
92. A friend of mine who is 10 years older than me and had started, teaching 10 years before me, she was starting like at 8,000. Wow. And that was back in the day. They still had to wear pantyhose, had to wear skirts, could not wear Yeah. So the profession, when you kind of look at it from its origin, when teachers back in the 1800s weren't even allowed to be married, were not allowed to go out after dark. And
well, they're comparing them like biblical or like religious figures.
Yeah.
Now, how do we get back to that? It all just comes full circle.
Hey. But it's just sad that I feel like we want to throw money at it, but we're not really wanting to change anything. And that's
at the end of the day, man, you got to put in the work,
And the work
doesn't solve it. You got to do it.
A lot of it, we talked about putting blame on teachers, and a lot of, the kids are going to want to have to learn. The kids are going to want to have to do.
And a lot of that starts at home.
It does. It all starts at home, especially the behavior.
Absolutely.
Issues. And they think, okay, well, so going back to the private, so the vouchers, it looks great, but the reality is not there. Let's say I have 4 kids and I live in Angelina County. Mm-hmm. I have one school right now, private school, that is pre-K through 12, and that is Elite Academy here in Lufkin.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They only meet in face-to-face twice a week. They also offer dual credit through Liberty University is what they were talking about.
You mean teacher and students only meet twice a week?
Twice a week.
The rest of it is just online?
The rest is online, and I'm not sure how else, they do this, but...
yeah, that online stuff doesn't work.
No, not for
especially not for a kid.
I mean, and I think they realized, they should have realized that after the COVID, after the pandemic, that wasn't working because...
Look at us now.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I call it the before time.
The before.
Yeah.
It damaged. It caused a lot of
almost
pain.
an entire generation of kids.
Yeah.
Now you got. I mean, I've heard rumors of rumors. I mean, I've heard people cover the stories. You got some kids in this country that are graduating high school that can't even read at an 8th grade level.
But that's also due to the fact that when I talked about the ability grouping and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Where with the STAR testing, with the standardized testing coming in, you expected kids to be at a certain level with everybody else, cookie cutter.
Yep.
Okay. Looking back at some of the school districts where I worked, and I looked at kids' STAR scores, there were some that have never passed a STAR test. Ever.
And they're just continually pushed on?
Keep progressing
Yes.
through.
They have to, and then, they give them so many tries in high school to take it, and if you don't, it's not realistic because they're not taking the human factor, like we talked about the AI, they're not taking that into consideration.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, does it actually matter if you pass or fail those tests? Or are you just going to get shoved through the system no matter what?
If you're special ed or 504, which goes with the special ed, eventually they will just
give you a pass.
Give you a pass and say, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So
now, does that go back kind of to the George Bush era of No Child Left Behind kind of thing?
Okay, those are slogans, and that's all they are. It's I'm going to make you feel good slogan, just like I'm going to make you feel good with that repackaged curriculum that we saw 10 years ago, but we called it something completely different.
Yeah. So when it comes to the school choice and the vouchers and stuff, if you had to put the blame on anybody, you don't have to say so, but if you had to put the blame on anybody, who do you think it would be primarily on?
As far as the voucher?
Yeah.
Well, Governor Abbott.
Okay.
At this point, he was pushing for it big time, and he knew darn good and well why he was pushing for it. And I've been looking at Facebook the last 3-4 weeks, and it would say something about, school choice, we're voting for it. And I would read the comments, and probably 75% of the comments, 80% were like, you're full of it, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
And it was
so the
teachers,
people knew he was just still pushing it.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, we run primarily a comedy satire page. If you ever look at our shorts, they're bonkers, completely insane. But we've made fun of Greg Abbott quite a bit, so for a plethora of reasons.
Well, hopefully the main thing is going to be that
we're going to write some stuff about this.
He is pushing something that nobody wants, and they were telling him they didn't want it, and they're telling him it doesn't work, and he just kept pushing and got what he wanted because he's benefiting from it.
Yeah.
He is.
And, now, to kind of branch that off, Greg Abbott has started his own Texas Doge committee, right? The same stuff that Elon Musk was doing with auditing the federal government. And now we're all fans for auditing the government and keeping them accountable with public money. Mm-hmm. But I know people that work in various departments in the state government that are just being screwed with now because of this. Mm-hmm. They're making cuts where they don't need to be making them, and I don't know. I feel like it's made up problems, It's what are you doing here? Are you just doing this to make you seem like you're achieving something great, or what? Or is there a payoff? What is happening here?
So, I looked a little further on that, and there is an app and a company, and they are called Class Wallet. Okay, they are going to be in charge of the distribution of the vouchers. How much they're making, I don't know. Okay.
And how are they making that money?
Well,
that's a big question.
It's like I said, it's like an app where you can go in, and we use something like that at St. Cyprian's, where the kids had an account for their lunches and things.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of like that, but it's a huge company, and apparently they are already active in several states that have the vouchers.
So I can tell you right now, they're already farming all that personal data.
Yes.
They're going to be selling it.
There you go. I didn't even think about that.
We've covered a lot of stuff like that, like in the past. I mean, shoot, we're getting close to like 90 episodes now, and at a minimum, they're all an hour each. So, there's a lot of gold in there. But, I don't know, man. It just seems education should be so simple, but yet it just seems like it's just such, I don't want to say a mess, right?
Like everything else, it gets sold out to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
as far as the voucher, how do you foresee this panning out within the next 2 to 3 years, just short term?
If we go the route Oklahoma did, they regretted it and got out of it.
Okay. So
Or are getting out of it.
Okay.
They're not happy with it. And if you look at the reality of it, okay, especially with the private schools being able to say, no, we're not going to take you, what happens if all of a sudden, people rush to take their kids? In the big cities, okay, they're going to have more of a choice because they're actually going to be in numerous private schools.
Mm-hmm.
Rural schools are going to get screwed.
They're going to have to say no.
They're going to have to. And what I was going to say earlier is, like, say you're living in Zavala and you have 4 kids that you want to send to private school. Okay, so your $40,000 goes to the tuition. Now you've got to take your kid to school. You've got to pick your kid back up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You've got to pay for lunches because they don't, have a lot of these schools don't have a cafeteria and stuff, so they cater.
And if you're already a low income family, I'm sure you already have a 9 to 5. You're not going to be able to take that time out of your schedule to do that for the children.
That's it. And then if you have to leave, a lot of these private schools do have, after school care until the parents get off, but that costs extra as well.
And that wouldn't be covered.
So,
oh gosh, the
No.
more you talk about it, the
No.
more you start to see that it's just kind of a nightmare.
it is. It's not. It's
That's
not
completely created for no reason.
It's not going to work. And why he's pushing it that much, and then I was thinking, this is something people don't. Okay, so if I want to take my kid out of one school district because I'm going to put him in another because that's a better district. Well, it may not be in an open enrollment district.
Mm-hmm.
They might not take them.
Yeah.
Okay, or even if they are an open enrollment school, what if I suddenly have 100 kids who show up who want to come to my school? I don't have room for 100 kids to come to my school. I don't have the classrooms. I don't have the teachers.
Jeez, man. This could very well become a big nightmare. Like just a
It can.
huge,
It can.
huge issue.
I think there are going to be regrets in the long run.
And then the sad part is at the end of the day, who suffers the most is the kids.
It is, and that's
your number one priority, supposedly.
Well, and I will use the words bullshit here because it's kind of like an issue, a fairly local issue that has come up recently on a school bond election.
Say it, Sylvia. Burn the ships. Let's do it.
Okay, well, it's where I live in Central, and for the second time they tried to pass a school bond.
Yeah.
And
For the second time, I voted no.
same. I'll be honest. I will be honest, and I voted. And
That makes 3 of us.
the bad thing is, well, what about the kids? What about the kids? And I was actually subbing there one day, and a lady whom I taught with, when I came out of the bathroom, she said, well, did you see that missing tile? And I'm like, it's a piece of missing tile. It's not going to make any difference on the kids' education one way or the other.
Yeah.
I can have the most beautiful classroom. I can have every computer in the world.
Yeah.
That's not what's going to make education better. So don't push that on me. I understand, wanting to have safety and more of a close campus and the kids not getting wet from the rain and stuff. But don't guilt me.
Yes.
Don't guilt me. I'm
Yeah.
paying taxes,
Yeah.
and Central is a property poor district, and they do have millions of dollars in their fund that can be used for maintenance. So, they were literally trashing and guilting people who they knew voted against it.
Oh, 100%. They were trashing businesses that they
Yes.
knew.
Yes.
And my whole thing, like you just stated, was there was nothing in there that I felt would actually benefit a child's ability to learn. There was no help for the teachers, no help for the students. It was just cosmetic shit. And I could not, I don't, you know me, I'm a cheap ass. I don't want to waste money on that stuff.
Well, and you're right, though, because, like I said earlier, with them throwing the money at education, you keep throwing the money, but it's like putting a Band-Aid and you're putting another Band-Aid, and that wound is still there once you tear the Band-Aids off, and it's festering by this time.
It's just government, man. It's you feed that machine and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's like no checks, and it just before you know it, it's out of your hands, and still nothing positive has come out of it. It's better just to not let it happen to begin with and just move on.
And that's why I think, honestly, let the teachers, the ones who are there every day. Because when I'm reading articles about Finland and their amazing educational system.
And their prisons.
Oh, do they have?
They have great prisons.
It's like you get like PlayStations, you get your own room, like you get cable television.
And they have one of the lowest repeat offenders out of the entire world too. But neither here nor there.
Yeah, we'll tell you about it later.
No, you're giving me ideas now. I might move to Finland. I might go to prison.
I'll tell you a story, a real story here later.
Okay.
But continue what you're saying. It's a true story about a guy who went to prison in Norway.
Oh.
But yeah, anyway.
But it's just, we talk about our education system, and this was even back when I guess in the 90s, in the early 90s, I got my master's in education. I remember taking this one class, and we read this book, and it was called The Factory Model School. You're a product. The kids are product. They go from one room to the next room to the next room to the next room, and they crank them out.
Oh, the Henry Ford method.
Nothing. The what?
The Henry Ford method.
Oh, okay. Assembly line, yeah. Yeah. And, I know some things have changed. Some things have gotten better, the technology and the different programs that they allow the kids to get, the endorsements and things. That's great, But every now and then they come along and they say, well, we've got this great, like the big push for college. Every kid can go to college. No.
Yeah, it's not for everybody.
They can't.
There's no reason.
There's not.
I know tons of people, like when going to college, I know tons of people that have no business being there, and they don't even know why they're there.
And they don't want to be there.
Exactly.
And
that's okay.
On the flip side, I know tons of people who are wildly successful that didn't even graduate high school.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we have to be realistic, and we can't give in to fads, that the fad is this or the fad is that, especially when you have documentation from other countries that say, okay, we're giving our elementary school kids 4 30-minute breaks a day so that they can socialize and that they can play, and this is how, because that's how you learn to get along and how to fix things and how to solve conflict. And
because at the end of the day, we actually are still like animals.
Yes.
Like there really is like the primitive aspect of being able to get along, like function in a group. How do you resolve conflict? How do you build trust? Like, how do you do all this other stuff?
You don't. Look at our Congress. They don't know how to solve problems. They can't get along.
They're actually psychos.
I
believe that they all are actually psychos. Like,
I think
at least 90% of them.
They're narcissists.
100%.
All of them.
No one wants that position without being that type of person anyway.
Yeah, Keith has told me to go into politics. I'm like, I can't in good conscience do that.
No.
I can't.
I have a cousin of mine that is a lobbyist. And he worked, I won't say who because they'll be able to track it down, but he worked for U.S. House of Representative member. And now the guy has since retired. He's not in office anymore. And so my cousin was his chief of staff. I think by that time he was 28 years old.
Wow.
And was very optimistic. Was like, this is good. Like, this is democracy. This is America. It's great. And he got in. He did it for, I believe, 2-3 years. And then he got out. And he never went back. And then he became a lobbyist for, I won't say what, but it's like some environmental stuff. It's actually really good stuff. It's to protect like certain aspects of our environment and wildlife. But he would tell me stories. And this guy, I mean, he doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, doesn't cuss, goes to church twice on Sundays, once on Wednesdays, right? And he was just like, he said DC was just the most disgusting place you could ever imagine. And he said a lot of people that you think are enemies and hate each other are actually like super buddy. And he said 90% of it is theatrics. He said the rest of it, like they just screw each other. They gridlock each other just to gridlock. They just be like, oh, I just don't want the Democrats or the Republicans to get a win.
That makes sense.
I don't want this to be under this president. They don't care about the people. And that's what he was like, yeah, it opened. He was like, you would not. And then he was like, and then all these private industries that come in there and lobby and the amount of money. And he was like, it's insane.
Well,
it's insane.
My husband and I have talked about, lobbying is just a form of legal bribery.
100%.
That's all it is.
It is. And it actually, I can't remember the case, but it actually went up to the Supreme Court. And it's a protected First Amendment right. Isn't that crazy?
It is. It's
because corporations are considered legal entities. On paper, they're people. So they have rights like freedom of speech. And lobbying falls under freedom of speech.
Well, there you go.
I think it's about time to getting close to wrap it up.
So one final question.
That's a good way
How do
to
you
end it.
feel about the education system as a whole? Do you think it's going in the right direction or not? We can leave the voucher to a side.
Yeah. Like I said, in the 30 years, I've really seen very little change in the basic direction that education is going. And despite the mandatory testing, it has not proven to have made anything better in any way. In fact, it's gotten worse in taking away cursive writing, which has been proven because you're writing and your pen is not leaving the paper, and that goes into critical thinking. And, you look at our students nowadays, and the critical thinking that's something that's gone by the wayside. So you're actually stunting development. And you mentioned earlier, about in the other countries that y'all have been to, how everybody speaks at least 2 languages. I said years ago, we need to be teaching Spanish to the kids when they're little, so by the time they graduate, they're speaking it fluently.
Yes.
I mean, we do have a program at SLAC that does that, and I do have a friend whose kid graduated from that, speaking fluent Spanish.
Yeah.
That would give us an edge in the business world.
It would.
And why do we not do that? We were the greatest country for the longest time, but you have to do things in order to stay that way, obviously.
Adapt or die.
Yes. And we are definitely not leaders in education anymore because we refuse. We think we're so good, and I'll say the phrase, our shit doesn't stink.
Yep.
So, why change anything? Why make it better? And it shows very clearly that the people are not cared about.
That is a good way to end that.
It is. So on that note, thanks for tuning in. I'm Moses Fortooth. This is Justin Allen. Huge thank you to Sylvia Weathers for talking to us. And buy the card game.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Woo.